Hey, soldiers, the governments of the world continue to chisel away at the dollar's reserve currency status. Now, this subject is not the most popular. It has become more popular over time as people start to wake up and pay attention. But on the Soldiers of Finance channel, we do things that point to important stories, whether they are popular yet or not. So we're going to get into more examples of how even friendly nations are starting to say, hey, we need some diversity in terms of our reserve currency and the way we pay for things. And the dollar ain't it. This as we continue to use America's economic might in the way a bully might use, a baseball bat. Okay? So it never ends well for bullies. It never ends well. Might take a while, but it never ends well. So, guys, we're going to get into this. More de-dollarization. Remember, Kevin O'Leary told us, hey, ain't nothing to worry about. We'll be dominant forever. Now, what he didn't do was what we do here on the Soldiers of Finance channel. He didn't explain to you that right now, the dollar is down to about 58% of reserve currency holdings in global central banks. It was at 62% 2 years ago. Now it's at 58% and dropping. That's going to have real world ramifications on the United States of America and citizens like you and me in terms of taxation and interest rates. As more of our money comes back here from these foreign governments, as they choose to keep reserves in other currencies or in commodities or pay for things like commodities in either commodities or other currencies. So Indian refiners' payments to Russia, Argentina, payment to International Monetary Fund, both in Chinese Yuan. In the first of two most recent examples of how non-Western nations plan to avoid the weaponized dollar, late last week, Argentina made a loan repayment to the International Monetary Fund worth the equivalent of $2.7 billion without using US dollars. On Friday, using Chinese Yuan and special drawing rights notes instead, this is what they paid with. The operation is expected to deplete Argentina's $1.65 billion in special drawing rights, according to a central bank source, with Chinese Yuan making up the difference. While Reuters' take-home message here is that the, quote, use of Yuan underscores how desperate the country's dollar position has become, unquote. An alternative conclusion is that when it comes to international obligations, at least as far as the IMF is concerned, the Yuan is as good as the greenback, an observation that will make China quite happy. Yeah, they're trying to position this as all these countries are having problems with dollar availability. That's and that may be some of it. But as the author just said, the credibility of the Yuan has just been increased simply by virtue of Argentina paying that loan in Yuan. As a result of the repayment, Argentina's foreign currency reserve saw a sharp decrease to around $27.9 billion for the end of June. The same source told Reuters, bringing foreign reserves to their lowest since March 2016. Still, the move gave a boost to Argentina's markets on the last day of the month, which overall in June saw the stock index tick up nearly 25% and bonds almost 13%. So the next president is going to have a really interesting set of circumstances that they inherit economically. And look, you run for president, you got to deal with whatever is on the table when your predecessor leaves. Now, if that next president is Joe Biden, of course, we can expect more of the same. We're going to go on a wild spending spree, which is going to embolden other nations to say, look, they're over there spending again, and it's just untenable. This is just crazy. Let's diversify. And he has shown a predilection to continue sanction on every little thing, foreign policy or domestic policy that he doesn't like or his administration doesn't like, the world over. Okay? And even, India. India, we just had Modi come here and meet with Biden. And I don't know if you saw the footage of them playing the national anthem. And Biden puts his hand over his heart. And then he slowly realized, oh, wait a minute. This isn't the American national anthem. I hope nobody noticed that. God, it's such an embarrassment. Both parties are now locked in talks to speed up disbursements from the $44 billion program and ease economic targets as major drought continues to hammer vital grain exports. All right, so we see that Argentina is another country that, they're out there. Don't cry for me, Argentina. And they are saying, well, let's do some things differently here. Let's go over here and mess around with the yuan. I mean, China is like the second biggest economy. BRICS has a bigger, when you put all the BRICS countries together, the GDP for BRICS countries and the BRICS organization is larger than America's and getting larger every day as more members join or seek to join. Argentina's economic ministry said a team will travel to Washington early next week to continue negotiations where the grain issue is concerned. And I'm sure during that meeting, the United States will have some conversation with them about, hey man, what's going on with all this trade in yuan. IMF staff and the Argentine authorities will continue to advance their work in the coming days with the aim of reaching agreement on the fifth review of the fund-supported program, blah, blah, blah. Indian refiners. Okay, let's move from Argentina to India. India, whose president just visited with Joe Biden here in Washington, D.C. Indian refiners have also begun paying for some oil imports from Russia in Chinese Yuan. Reuters also reported, citing sources with direct knowledge of the matter, as Western sanctions force Moscow and its customers to find alternatives to the dollar for settling payments. And we saw even France do that. France's Total SA, we reported on that oil company settling trades in yuan. That was a first for France and certainly not a good look for the US dollar, considering that France is a member of the allied EU, our oldest friend internationally, and also a NATO member. So again, not a good look. In other words, it is the weaponization of the dollar that is forcing the world to find alternatives to the dollar. Something we have been warning would happen ever since Russia was effectively blacklisted and targeted by the entire dollar-based monetary platform. But the problem is, this would have worked well back in the 90s, okay, when China wasn't as strong. This would have worked well. And when Russia wouldn't have invaded Ukraine back then because, it was so much turmoil and they were trying to get their footing. It might have worked in the 2000s even, okay, but it's not working today. So we got India, we got Argentina, and just in case there is still some confusion about the long-term viability of the petrodollar, China has also switched to the yuan for most of its energy imports from Russia, which overtook Saudi Arabia to become China's top crude supplier in the first quarter of 2023. So we got all these sanctions on Russia, and don't mean a hill of beans because these countries are saying we're still going to do business with them because we have needs too. And we're not going to face revolution in our country because our people can't heat their homes, all right, while you over there in America try to figure out what the definition of a woman is. Some refiners are paying in other currencies like yuan if banks are not willing to settle trade in dollars, said an Indian government source. Indian Oil Corp, the country's biggest buyer of Russian crude oil, in June became the first state refiner to pay for some Russian purchases in yuan. 3 sources familiar with the matter said at least 2 of India's 3 private refiners are also paying for some Russian imports in yuan, two other sources said. According to Reuters, it could not immediately be determined how much Russian oil Indian refiners have bought with the yuan, although Indian oil has paid in yuan for multiple cargoes. All right. The rise in yuan payments has given a boost to Beijing's effort to internationalize its currency, with Chinese banks promoting its use specifically for Russian oil trade. Now look, is the Chinese yuan going to totally eclipse the dollar? You're going to wake up 2 days from now and everybody's going to be using the yuan? No, it's not how it's going to happen. We're going to gradually slide into an environment where there's a multipolar environment. The Chinese yuan is already becoming one. Okay, you can say what you will. Oh, this pales in comparison to the U.S. economy. Well, it's got to start somewhere. Okay, we're seeing the willingness by allies like Saudi Arabia, France, India. Okay, so it's got to start somewhere. And it's going to be the yuan's going to play a role, and probably the BRICS currency that they're trying to put together, which would be a commodities-backed currency, backed by gold. A lot of these African countries are rich in gold. Oil, Saudi Arabia. Russia is a member of OPEC+, don't forget. Okay? This whole thing we've been talking about has been, with this, from the standpoint of the Indians, it's all about buying oil. Chinese buying oil from Russia in yuan. Since the imposition of sanctions on Moscow, Indian refiners have mostly bought Russian crude oil from Dubai-based traders and Russian oil companies such as Rosneft and Litasco, the Litasco unit of Russian oil major Lukoil, and Gazprom Neft, according to shipping data compiled by Reuters. Indian refiners have also settled some non-dollar payments for Russian oil in UAE dirham, sources have said. So anything but the dollar, right? So that's where we are, guys. We have a chance, believe it or not, to restore sanity in the American economic system and some semblance of faith in the dollar. But it's definitely not going to happen as long as we have the current administration in place. All right. This is the same administration that thinks it's okay for college admissions to be based on race. They don't see that as a problem. Here's a video we did which outlines the Supreme Court's decision with regard to the recent race-based college admissions case. This is important because what it does, the way they ruled, it does a lot to fight the stigma of an inability to achieve greatness by blacks. And it also makes the system fairer. And if these colleges really want to have a meritocracy, there is one thing that they can do on their own without any help from anyone. And we cover that in this video. Guys, I'll talk to you soon.